complexity, information, complexity, entropy, and the physics of information. There's another great author which is worth looking at. It's Tom Steier.
Oh, what's the name of this author?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of the author? Another good author to look at is Tom Steier. Tom Steier. He's done a lot of work on information, intelligence, and meaning. It's worth looking at.
I've been working with Otto Rosler, and so he has this thing called endophysics, which is the physics from within. So his idea is to make a model world that has the exophysics, and then the body, it's called world as interface. So it might be very close to that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for your
email address.
That's a new one. I had a good voice.
I started this role just this week at the
Yeah, I was sorry to miss it.
You can find it. I'd love to have it on those. ISSS.
So it's cheap. I just want to make sure.
Yes, there's stamp on there for speakers.
Okay, sure.
Don't forget they're on Zoom. And you'll be on
What's your name?
Gary Smith.
University.
I actually work at Airbus.
Oh, I see. I wrote the book.
I don't know when I'll sound on your
member for a year.
That's great.
But if you want me to send you this book,
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
yes.
My apologies for my delay. People decided to take me on a tour of DC. I knew K Street was right, and then next thing you knew, I was down at Capitol Arena. That was not where I wanted to be. So, it said it's taking me a different way today. You're going construction. They didn't tell me it was taking me to Capitol Arena. So, we're here to talk about my theory of quantum social learning and how we can impact cultural transformation. And I want to thank Fred for introducing me. So like most of you, I've spent most of my life looking at how to resolve complex issues. I've been really fortunate to have Fred as my mentor for the past 3 years, and I wouldn't be here with this level without his support and guidance. This model began as an examination of how to undo systemic injustice, both for everyone in our world, because we're so tied into the Western Cartesian duality that it's the property rights and so many things are embedded into our society and our legal system and how all of our rules and regulations, and it creates a big problem. So I first started looking at this back before 2016 because I was looking at the polarization I was seeing on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and watching how people were divided into groups. And that was the social learning, quantum social learning theory. But then I looked at how can we use that to dismantle the cultural systemic injustices. First of all, I want to be very clear, I am not a quantum physicist. I've spent 3 years heavy duty into quantum physics and organizational science, cognitive science. I'm very transdisciplinary. More accurately, I would be an organizational systems scientist using quantum theory, or a quantum social systems scientist. It's a very different aspect, and we're bringing quantum theory into the social sciences. And I will actually be the first person working on doing this within a group instead of one-on-one decision making. So this is really very much pioneering work that I have a lot of quantum physicists watching what I'm doing to see if I can Robert Feynman, who's a brilliant theoretical physicist that passed his late. If you understand quantum physics, if you think you understand quantum physics, you don't. It is one of the most confusing, and every time you think you put your finger on it, it scoots away. It's like herding cats. But it's also great fun, and it opens up such an amazing variety of ways we can look at things. So first of all, what is social learning? Social learning is how animals learn from one another, typically in groups. But we're going to focus on how humans learn from one another in groups. The information process flow is really the key to it. It can be considered a series of inputs, or as I'm looking at, decision making that actually creates learning. I'm drawing heavily from Carl Leek on sense making, on Wenger Trainer, for the pair of them, husband and wife team. Social learning that they developed theory after communities practice, and then Siemens and Downs, which actually created connectivism, which is used for distance education, and that was actually one of my last degrees was in distance education, so I attached myself to that theory and started looking at the quantum aspect back then. These slides are going to go quickly too. So why quantum social learning? So these are all very solid theories, but they're missing essential elements to describe the current social issues like polarization and our digital social learning platform issues on social media. So I propose looking at social learning as a set of decisions that are entangled with others within their social group, creating dendritic branching that follows the shape of our nerve cells, trees, our lungs, pretty much everything. And I'm going to give credit to Tyler Rook for who's an environmental scientist, for his exploration of these dendritic branching from his book Meta Patterns. It was a wonderful inspiration that I found in the 90s, and then actually had an opportunity to meet him again through Fred. So in looking at this, we have to understand cognitive science. So how our brain develops is really very important. Again, we're looking at just humans, we're not looking at animals for this in particular. Our brain develops into stages with specific parts of the brain actually being activated at different points as we're learning different things and as different hormones flood our system. So this development can be impacted by internal or external traumas. It can be stressors, it can be trauma, it can be a neurochemical imbalance, it can be any variety of things, and that can stop a particular stage from being developed. However, it's not necessarily permanent. It can be counteracted. As we learn in those developmental stages, specific information of specific areas of the brain store that information. So routine things as if we're going driving, we know when to press the gas pedal, when to press the accelerator, when to turn, our signals. Those things are routine. That's stored in a part of our brain that's very routinized. We also see that for military, when we're training special forces, it's a continual, it's that first reaction, train and train and train until that particular skill is just innate and it's ingrained in your body and your brain, and you just do it. One part of that is that when we have that area, when we have those routinized and things that we've already experienced, we actually store them in our limbic system and our amygdala. So when we encounter those things again, we actually have that knowledge pulled through there and emotions will come with them. You can kind of see where the polarization is coming from now, right? So during this time, there's something called a critical period. I call it a critical learning period, just to make it easier for everybody to understand, and neuroplasticity. The critical period is when our brain development is occurring. And again, it isn't necessarily permanent, it can be counteracted. Uwe Dolan, who is a cognitive science at Johns Hopkins, is researching using psychoactives. The street name of it is ecstasy, but it's MDMA, on octopi, and on people that have PTSD to reopen that critical learning period. Now, I'm obviously not suggesting we need to give people that to change their beliefs, But she also, in conversation with her, she was suggested that there is a good amount of evidence that that could be counteracted through things like shamanic breathing and shamanic practices. So there are ways to reopen without pharmaceuticals. And just giving somebody ecstasy isn't enough to change their mind or change an embryo for the critical period. There's a specific 3-week process, a set of protocols that need to be done to be able to do that. So neuroplasticity is at its widest when we're looking at novel stimuluses or stimuli. Our prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until age 25. So our 18-year-olds, they don't have that executive functioning, that high executive function. That's why you see more car accidents in under 26, under 25-year-olds. That's why our insurance changes at that age. That's why you can't rent a car until you're 25 or 26. It's a gradual process, and it takes time for the brain to mature. Humans are not like most other animals. We have a full caretaking system usually until we're 16 or 18 years of age. And then we usually, children, teenagers, 18-year-olds, will either go into different types of internships or to college to learn more, to fully develop in the next stage. So again, when humans are facing a situation they've already experienced before, they're processing it through the cerebrum and then the amygdala. Novel stimuli are processed through the frontal lobe and the prefrontal lobe. That's actually what I'm particularly interested in. So decision making is in groups. You'll see that we have an event or stimulus, and then is it novel? If it's not, it's going to be processed back through the amygdala and the limbic system. If it's a new one, it's going to go through the frontal cortex. If it's in an adult over 25, which is what I'm focusing on, just because I have to minimize the variables that I can, I'm going to be looking at the adults over 25 because they use their prefrontal cortex. So in 80% of our learning is actually social learning. So what we're learning as human beings, as much as we might know with our PhDs, humans you consider it 3 or 4% of the US actually have a PhD. As much as what we learn, we're still learning constantly through our shoes. You think about when we came here today and yesterday, we had to navigate to get here. We had to interact with people and decide how we're going to do presentations, who we want to watch, have conversations with people. So we're still learning and taking in social cues, even after all of this education and all of this time we've spent. Anything that has an emotion is going to create a deeper memory. So you think about PTSD. Why do people have PTSD? Either they had issues as children with traumatic issues with their family members, or maybe they went to they were deployed and they came to saw horrible things, and that part's embedded, and that's why we see people have problems at that point. In making decisions, groups can use cooperative skills which are reinforced by these social bonds. Almost to the quantum part, because we have to understand how classical decision making works first. So framing narratives and metaphors. So Fred reintroduced me to the importance of framing metaphors. George Lakoff is a cognitive linguist, and he uses a lot of examples in politics. He was a key advisor in the UK, and one of his books is Don't Mention the Elephant. You don't want to reuse words that are already dog whistles or already key words when you're trying to change people's minds. The leader or the first person, which could also be referred to as Agent Zero, tends to state their opinion on a subject, and then that actually has an amazing amount of impact. And that is supported with a substantial amount of classical studies that have been done recently on disinformation, which is part of what I'm looking at, that that first person that makes that statement, that's the thing that they're going to stick to. Anything you do after that to try to remove that idea is usually futile. Even if, for example, there was one study, they looked at the Ukraine war. People heard misinformation on the first set around. Even though they learned the actual fact later, their emotional response still stuck to that first concept that they were taught. Again, still processing through the limbic system, even when they know better. And that's really important to really realize how tied our brains are to the initial decisions, the initial narratives that they've heard. So of course we have risks whenever we have narrative restrictions. One of the biggest things is AI and ML. ChatGPT actually is learning from what's already available on Google and other places. So to use a rather old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. If what it's learning is wrong, it's never going to be able to unlearn that. That's always part of AI and the machine, ChatGPT, understanding, because you can't remove that. It kind of works like that with humans in a lot of ways. We also see things like the polarization, which is really my biggest concern, because I see this as my work as being important to reduce systemic injustice, but also to help reduce the polarization we're seeing, not just in our country, but in countries across the world. So this is an illustration. It's my best opportunity because it's just trying so hard to do things three-dimensional and bring in that quantum focus. So it's very hard to make these images a lot of times. But this is how all the other members of the group look at these previous decisions. So you see number one at the top. Number one is the first person that gets to make that decision or set the narrative. I heard this about this person, or I heard this person did this, or I heard the government's doing this, or whatever the case is. And because that person states it first, and think about social media, think about Facebook. Somebody posts something, and then people automatically, because somebody said something, they tend to believe it right away. It's something that they've never heard about. SpaceX, it was aliens. I saw that for a long time. I've seen so many crazy conspiracy theories, but people are just trying to make sense out of something they haven't seen. So you can't really judge them for it. We can all chuckle about it, and a lot of times I chuckle with these people later when I'm talking to them. Sometimes they're friends. I'm like, no, that isn't really what happened. But every single other person in the group is going to look at the second person here. They're going to look back at the first person. The third person is going to look at the second person and the first person. So even if everybody else is looking at the people before them, the first person is the one that every single one of them is going to look at. So that creates a tremendous amount of impact for that decision. So in classical probability, right, it's all done, A plus B is always going to be A plus B. That's going to put us right here, right? Everybody normally in classical decision making, or if we use classical probability, if we just had 5 people and everybody had a say, it should be in the middle, but it's not. It's actually up here. So again, here's where quantum comes into play. Classical theory, which we've all learned, gravity, everything we've learned is based on classical theory, which dates back to Roman times, to Aristotle, and Newton. It's just been followed. It's very binary. It's very Cartesian. It's our Western way of thinking. In classical probability, order does not matter. Amazingly enough. In quantum probability, it does. Classical probability is very linear. So if we go over to the quantum side, quantum is relationship-based. Everything is entangled. Quantum probability, order matters. Joyce Wang is a well-known quantum cognitive decision-making researcher, wonderful woman, spent some time with her as well. She and some of the other researchers, Buchmeier and Bruzak and Pathos, all have worked on looking at massive, they took a meta-analysis of Q data, and they asked if they took from the 90s, they asked if Clinton was a good president, and then they asked if Quayle was a good VP. And they asked one direction, right? Clinton and then Quayle. The next time they came back and they asked about Quayle and Clinton. There was actually a 17-point spread depending on which one was asked first. And this is, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people polled. Why should that happen? There's no explanation for it in classical probability. That's where quantum probability comes in. The other important aspect of quantum theory is space and time are not two different subjects. They're, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of quantum theory. It's going to be too much, but the key things we want to look at are entanglement and superposition. So superposition is when, yeah, I guess I will a little bit. Superposition is when something is in a wave, and then when we actually observe it, it's a point in space-time. So everybody's heard of Schrödinger, right? The cat. Is cat dead or alive? We don't know because we don't know where the rate of decay is. Entanglement is where two particles, or it could be two positions, are connected across space-time. And again, space-time is very important because, I'm going to go one ahead. They can actually indigenous ways of learning. Sometimes, for everybody who doesn't know, I didn't introduce myself properly. I am actually of the Piscataway Choctaw tribe, who is the tribe that actually is from the DC area. I'm one of the descendants, and so I speak with my elders in my tribe, and I speak to elders across different parts of the U.S. Sometimes I'm fortunate enough to go and get to speak to people out of the U.S. But most of my elders that I've spoken with have agreed that this is quantum and an indigenous way of knowing. This is the same thing pretty much. And I was taught by one of my medicine teachers back in the 1990s, and I said, well, I don't know what really is about quantum theory, but the more we've learned about quantum theory and the more I've spent time working with the elders and actually looking at indigenous methodologies, the more I've seen, yes, it really is. It's very much relationship-based. It's entangled. What happens to one happens to all. It's also, in space-time, it's not what's happening right now. It's also what happened a couple hundred years ago, or what's going to happen 150 years ago to our descendants. It's non-binary. Almost every single language at least in the Americas, there are not two words for gender. There's not just male, female. One tribe, this language has 50 different words for gender, because it's about gender expression and about behavior and other aspects more than just what our XY are, and even XY is not accurate anymore. It actually never was, but we just didn't understand that. So in the Maori culture in particular, space-time is the same word. My tribe here, we lost our language when the colonists came over and everybody went to residential school, so I'm still working on helping to rebuild that. But basically in Algonquin, which is the root of the Piscataway and Nanaco language, there are more words than just two for our gender as well, and for space-time. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I want to go back to one that I missed. Okay, so quantum decision making. So in quantum decision making, whoops, went too far back. Okay. So quantum decision making allows for non-binary actions. So instead of just having yes, no, 0, 1, like we have our computers set up when we're looking at quantum computers, it allows for an entire range between 0 and 1. And it's quantum probability uses vectors or linear algebra. So again, it's not just even across this way or across one plane. It's also across vertical. It's dimensional. So it gives us a lot better insight into how decisions are made. The biggest reason why we need to look at quantum decision making is because it explains the research findings that were previously coded as operations. Work required this amazing hegemonic design to be able to support, like, why did this just happen? And they found that our decision making is not obeying the commutative axioms or the Bayesian version all the time. So this is why context matters and using quantum to look at these things is really provide such an amazing variety more of what we can see through classical probability. Okay, so attaching to Maturana. So language is an artifact. I'm so sorry that Kelia is not here. Kelia is my external reader. Language is an artifact that symbolizes the learning and the shared reality of the culture. So basically, language acts as an entanglement. So we make a decision with a group, we create a language for it, and then that's our shared reality. And that may be different than other people's reality. When you try to eat politics out of it, just try to think of like every subculture all has different vernacular to support different aspects. And the same word that the people in the subculture are using may be a different word than what everybody who speaks English uses, or everybody's just using English for an example. It can be the same word but it's a different meaning. Or there might be a slang version that people come up with, like all our younger kids, come on, spill the tea, right? It means, share the dirt, tell me what you know. I mean, the 411, every single generation has had a different term for that. And unless you're part of that group, you don't know that term. So that's how that language becomes an entanglement to create part of our reality. So if you look at many of the other components, and I actually, some of them aren't coming up, but there's culture, there's evolution, there's concerns, there's emotioning. Up here on the one side, there's cognitive. So Maturana is actually looking at a lot of this. And then when I started reading Maturana, I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense with quantum. But when I kept looking for more empirical work, I couldn't find it. And that's what I feel so many times people have these brilliant theories. And are known to be brilliant, and we follow them, and we don't have empirical evidence yet. So this is what I'm trying to do, is create some of this. So so to break the cycle of how we get into the transformation part. So we have a novel event. Our leader, or agent 0, which is the first person, is going to create a narrative. The individuals will confirm or deny or wait a cycle for a decision. The group narrative is determined. And then they create the language about that event. Maybe it was, a SpaceX and it was aliens, and then there's like this whole thing that comes with that as part of the story and part of the narrative and part of that reality. So then the culture is created about that. The next event that's similar to that is then processed through the limbic system. So people already have a fixed idea of what it was, a shared experience, and they're less likely to accept, even when they find out, no, that was just SpaceX. It wasn't aliens. People were still like, no, it was aliens. So successive generations of decision making will tighten that narrative. So every time they hear that new piece of information, there's people that are still going to be resistant to it. So ways to break the cycle. So if you're, this is just some, these are some tips. If you use that, so if we talk to people before they form that narrative and help with that framing, that helps. Languaging, that cultural aspect, if we can work inside of that, sometimes that'll help. But the most important thing is to reframe it. So if somebody's saying, you don't want us to come back, SpaceX and alien, let's use that one again. You don't want to come back saying, no, it wasn't an alien, it was SpaceX. You want to actually explain, no, it was SpaceX, this is what was happening, this is the day they launched, and then don't even bring up the alien part, because as soon as you bring the alien, they attach to that, and they emotions concept. So that's what we don't want to use. We don't use the same language. Try not to use alien. It wasn't something unknown. It was just SpaceX. So that's basically the short version on how to combat this information. That's really very simplistic, but looking at, again, there's so many brilliant scholars that are out there that I'm using their work as a basis for that. So Karen Barad is a theoretical physicist. She also works with gender studies, or sorry, they works with gender studies. Karen O'Brien is in Oslo, and she has some wonderful things coming out. So if you're interested, you might want to look up Karen O'Brien. Her book is very, very readable, very understandable, and it's easy to get some basic grasp. And it's one of the first times I felt like I had hope again in the world, which is why I really launched into this. And then Alexander Wendt is an international relations professor at Ohio State, and they do a quantum boot camp. And I'm going to show you that on the next page. But Alex has been really very much out there, like trying to get quantum social science out to the world. But if we're working to that quantum level, it takes away a lot of that language. It kind of starts coming from more of an undercurrent, and it shows how we can make a difference. Understanding quantum learning as a series of decisions using superposition, which superposition being the person that makes the first decision has made a decision, but until the next person makes a decision, they're in that superposition state. So being able to intercede while they're still in superposition can help if we can provide information before somebody becomes fixed about what they want to believe. So what I'm hoping for, and how I started this, was there's just so many problems in the world. I mean, we always start with the world's on fire. And I just wanted to see if there's a way that I can help to fix it. So I'm hoping that this will at least create a beginning point where we can start unraveling all of those wicked crises or wicked problems and meta crises. That we don't have to sit there and keep pulling on the strings and then just tightens it up, but actually to work within and softly let them kind of unbind. So if you're interested, this is just my last slide, and I just want to make this available because I really am very much dedicated to quantum social science. This is Ohio State that is doing their, I think, the fourth year this year. Yeah, fourth boot camp year, funded by Carnegie. And it's a quantum social boot camp. It's online. It's 1 week long. It's free. All you have to do is register, so you definitely want to get registered. It's next month in July. Not for the July week, but the second week of July. It's really worth it. They have the most amazing theoretical physicists that sometimes you just sit there and you're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And I may or may not be able to follow all of it, but they're brilliant. And then a lot of social scientists that are using quantum that have a lot of really good information and are working on amazing things. After that, if you want to participate, there's actually a monthly quantum social science meeting that I've been a part of for the last year. And it's really amazing to watch what everybody's doing in the world with this. Because there's only about 20 of us, maybe 40 of us in the world, it feels like. So, welcome to anybody that wants to join in. And so now I'll take questions, and if you need me to change back to any screens, I can do that. Yes?
You're just studying 25 years on? Is that right?
Yes.
So, okay, it would be nice if anybody is researching before 25 years, the sort of 0 to, particularly you said something about 75% or 95% is social learning and bringing
Yeah, 80%.
80%. So my concern is that young people are being denied the social interaction because they're being put in front of iPhones and iPads. And I'm concerned about that. So if there's any way we can encourage some quantum study of the effects.
This is my dissertation project.
Right.
So about 6 months from now, I'll be able to start on the next series, but I need to get one set and actually confirm that this model that because nobody knows how to do the quantum decision-making model in a group. I've actually created one, and I have people that have looked at it that said, yeah, that probably should work, but we don't know 100% it will. So until I test it and I know that this theory, this model works, I can't go forward and look for the type of funding that I need through NSF or one of the other organizations so I can do a larger study.
Yeah, I'm just wondering too about whether that decision-making model will be valid if the learning of the young people today are not learning in the way that people that are more than 25 now did.
Right.
So anyway,
yeah, it's very important.
Let's have some conversations about what you do in 6 months' time, please.
Yes.
I've been thinking in the past about how do you, from just one observation, so quantum's about if you don't have a lot of observations, you can't ascertain something at a time, so then you don't have time. And you've done something unusual, because I haven't seen anyone else do it with narrative. Because you're saying that the way narrative is structured, also if you only have 1 or 2 samples, it breaks down to quantum. Normally you would have lots of measurements, so therefore it aggregates and it just becomes classical. But is there something before narrative, like looking at the process of going from sense making to story to narrative, because often the narrative is a top-down position of structure, and that has to be built up from somewhere.
Peter, these are the official classes of the
I
Ministry
really
of
like
Fine.
how you're rolling along the social media platforms and the forums this theory. I think even if we look at from the time somebody's an infant and up, they have elders who are telling them how to be in the world. This is how we eat. This is how we talk to other people. This is how we hunt. This is, we can go back that far. Or this is how we get ready to go to school. Or this is this type of life that we have. And if you look at even different socioeconomic classes or anything along those lines, you see that people do things in different ways, different subcultures, different world, different people, countries. We all have a way that we learn. So it is in some way narrative, because we're kind of guiding people off to an end result. So yes, I understand what you're saying, but I really drew a lot from the disinformation and misinformation work that primarily from Cambridge, that actually is based on narratives. So that's my kind of target.
Are you almost using the novel event then to get the quantum, because the novel event becomes point in time?
Yeah, the novel event is just a processing through our prefrontal, and it's not something, because if for instance, and again, not going political, but I'm just saying, right now in the U.S., if you ask people about Trump or Biden, automatically everybody tenses up, because they already have a formed opinion, right? So anything I ask about that is not really helpful, so that's why I need to come back and come with something new. In fact, for my pilot study, it was aliens. And Fred and I laughed, and I said, I don't know what else to use yet. I'm like, I'm going to just try with aliens.
I was my alien.
But in my pilot study, it was amazing because nobody could see each other, right? I took away every visual capability, they all were assigned numbers. They had their role to see who was going to be first. Because I wanted to take away, like, so if you look at this person or that person, you're automatically going to make judgments about them. It's just because this is something we do. This is part of us being safe in the world, too. It's like, is this person safe? Is that person safe? Do we trust this person? Do we not? So if you strip away all of that and you give somebody a piece of information and you say, do you believe this information or not? They're all looking around, they're like, we have nothing, we have no touch points. So it's like being a child again. And that's why that's why I'm trying to work with that, because if otherwise I'm going to end up with too many things that are going to be entangled into the decision making that I don't know how else to take them out.
You know the work of David Bowen?
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's a system. Yes.
Yeah.
I have a
the
stack.
Blackfoot and P stuff and Blackfoot physics. So they're then spotting the.
Yeah, there's
seem quite relevant.
Yeah, Capra, just so many of the physicists, and they're so brilliant, but it's really hard to like bring it down to like where can we actually create studies about it, because they all have plenty of theories.
Well, Bowen's done a lot of did do a lot of social dialogue work that also seems to resonate with some of the
Yes, the social dialogue, yes. Yes.
So in quantum physics, there is a quantum entanglement effect, meaning that when an observer starts to observing the thing that being observed will inevitably being affected by the existence of an observer. And this is my first time getting to know this concept of quantum social science, and I'm just wondering that is this quantum interpretation effect also exists in the quantum social science field? And if so, like you said, you're doing a pilot study and workshop to prove the theory to this topic. How do you manage this measurement of the existence of an observer at a quantum level?
There is a set of quantum mathematics used for quantum probability for each specific area. In this case, I'm going to be using quantum mathematics for superposition, and that actually accounts for all of that. So it's cheating, because I'm coming back and using stuff that already exists, but yeah, because I'm not a quantum physicist, and I should know ways we can do that. Yeah, so it's coming back and using the quantum mathematics for probability, in this case specifically for superposition. But you're exactly right. The observer effect is one of those things that, again, we see that in cybernetics, right? As Fred's talk this afternoon, observing the observed. So I mean, like we all, it's like when we spend time together, we all kind of learn different things, and it's like we automatically start putting them into our theories. Yes.
I think you sort of answered this question a little bit before, but I was curious about, it's really fascinating work, how you take that sense in which, in social relations we kind of fall into roles, someone might be active, someone might be passive, and that obviously affects, the way that the decision making, so you might, but I think I took to you to be saying before, maybe you're trying to remove that by giving people this information to say, is that right?
Right, so in my pilot study what I did was, I had 5 different, and I'm only doing it this way, 5 different questions with a group of 5, and I would like to do more different, but there's no way possible for me to do quantum math quickly enough and finish my dissertation in the next 5 years otherwise. And I just need to basically test the model, but initially what I did was 5 people, 5 questions. I made them roll to see, like for gaming, to see who actually had initiative, so who would start. And that person got to decide whether or not the information I gave them was true, false, or they didn't want to make a decision yet. And then the next people enrolled, they were able to make their choice. But really, nobody made a choice until they heard the people before them, and it led them. So each time, each question, I had to roll again. It was a lot to put together, and it seems really simplistic, but it's taken this long to even come up with how do you do this for groups.
Thank you.